Greetings. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of CRC Music in the Studio, featuring pianist Jeff LaDeur and Kindra Scharich. These weekly events are a real treat. They're a treat for me. They're a treat for the students in our community. And, it's even better when you can invite people on that are not only incredible artists, but are also good friends. And today's one of those days. We are going to, in just one moment, we're going to welcome Jeff LaDeur. Kindra is going to be joining us shortly. But let's bring Jeff LaDeur onto in the studio.
Thank you so much, Kurt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Jeff, great to see you. Let's introduce you a little bit to our listeners here, if we can. Jeff LaDeur is known for his rare blend of insight, spontaneity, and approachable communicative stage presence. In March of 2018, LaDeur made his solo recital debut at Carnegie Hall on the centennial of Claude Debussy's death. We were just talking about that. He appears regularly with orchestra and maintains a repertoire of over 40 concerti. LaDeur is the founder and artistic director of the San Francisco International Piano Festival and president of the American Liszt Society San Francisco Bay Area chapter. A chamber musician of distinctions, Jeff's collaboration with mezzo-soprano Kindra Scharich has produced To My Distant Beloved, an album exploring the connections between Beethoven and Schumann through cycles in song and solo works. We're certainly going to hear some of these works. So welcome, Jeff. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, we're so glad that you can be here, and we're going to hear some music from you in just a little bit. But maybe you could sort of start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about how you sort of first got into music. Our students here are on that beginning path, and I'm sure that they would love to hear kind of what you went through and how you sort of arrived where you're at.
Absolutely. I grew up in the Midwest, about an hour west of Chicago, and I started taking piano lessons when I was 8. It was during a very difficult time for my family because my dad had just passed away. And so I think my mom saw the opportunity to engage me with music during that time. And I really took to it and kind of couldn't stop once I started. So whether it was 5-finger exercises, or I remember the first Christmas, my beginning piano teacher had a little contest for her students to memorize as many Christmas carols as they could, like, single position Christmas carols. And I think I memorized something like 18. And she was like, okay, I don't know what to do with this kid, but he clearly loves music. So I really responded to it. There's a lot of great music in the Chicago area, of course, as you know. So I remember hearing Alfred Brendel play the Emperor Concerto when I was 11.
Oh, wow.
With the Chicago Symphony, and of course that made an enormous impression. And there's a great classical radio station in Chicago as well. So there were some good outlets there in terms of introducing me not just to the piano, but to all different kinds of music. And I, kind of progressed from teacher to teacher. Eventually at 16, I met the teacher that I would call the great mentor of my musical life. And worked with her off and on until she died over 15 years. So I have some kind of traditional conservatory education in my background, and I'm very grateful for those experiences. And I also feel like there's so much outside of that has contributed to the musician that I am and to my own teaching. So yeah, that's a little background.
Yeah. Wow. It struck me as we talk to different artists and musicians each week, certain themes tend to sort of come up, although everyone's a little bit different. But discovering that passion early. I mean, even the form of memorizing 18, you know, Christmas carols or whatever they were. I mean, it's amazing that we can, look back on some of these things that maybe, you might not have, somebody else would just sort of look over, but you can see, it was there, that spark was there from the beginning, and it just sort of took over.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can happen in all different places too. Everything from I remember hearing a couple girls playing Heart and Soul on the piano at school that completely blew my mind, you know. That was before I started taking lessons. And then on the other side, like I said, hearing Brendel play the Emperor Concerto, I can still remember the quality of sound in some of the pianissimo passages. Not knowing the piece at the time or anything like that, but it was just like I can still hear that.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you who may not be familiar with the artistry of Alfred Brendel, just an absolutely iconic, amazing, amazing pianist. So incredibly clean. I mean, do some YouTube Googling and, do yourself a favor, find some recordings because they're really wonderful. That sounds very fortunate. I mean, being close to Chicago with such an arts hub for the Midwest, that's a kind of a unique opportunity for you. Let's say,
Absolutely.
were there other performances or other things that stuck out for you? I mean, were you either piano related or otherwise? What were some other maybe experiences or things that really caught your attention when you were younger?
Sure. I mean, in terms of piano, I can tell you definitively, Abby Simon, a great American pianist who
Another
died
one.
just last year or 2 years ago, and a real kind of connector to the 19th century tradition, a romantic tradition of piano playing, came to my hometown, Wheaton, Illinois, and played an all Chopin recital. And that was the first great recital that I heard. And I can tell you the program, I can tell you some of the voicing things that he did. I remember that he improvised little harmonic preparations between Opus 10 etudes. I remember the encores. I remember the master class the next day. Um, I remember at the end of this gigantic recital, I mean, he opened with the B minor Chopin sonata, which is like 25 minutes and, enormous. At the end of this gigantic recital, he played Gluck's Dance of the Blessed Spirits
Hmm.
in a hall that was maybe, I don't know, 2,000, sold out concert, enormous hall. And again, the soft playing really stuck with me, you know? So that was a totally formative experience in terms of piano. And then I would say two singers that I heard early on, and I can't remember exactly when. Emma Kirkby came through with the Academy of Ancient Music and sang a Baroque concert with them. And I'd never heard a voice do those things. I thought it was incredibly beautiful. And then as a teenager, I got to hear Cecilia Bartoli. And that was, totally life changing. So,
Wow, wow. Well, speaking of incredible singers, I I do believe that we're joined by one. How about
that's
that? Kendra, Kendra Scharich. Kendra, can you see us?
Yes, I can see you. Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah.
That's a nice introduction. Thank you, Kurt.
We went from Cecilia Bartoli just straight over to you. I think that's, just right in succession.
Oh, well, I'm honored. Thank you, Gabriel. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you both. As I was mentioning in the introduction, it's great to not only have incredible artists on our weekly series, but when you get an opportunity to have people that are actually really great friends and colleagues, then it's just it's the cherry on top. So I'm gonna just finish up a couple more questions with Jeff, and then we'll move over and talk about all sorts of other things. So Jeff is describing his background and all of the different influences and the concerts that were definitive. And I feel like offline we could like continue this conversation, particularly about
totally.
Abby Simon. But so here's this this young piano obsessed kid in his teens who has these opportunities to see these great artists and is so fascinated by the instrument. And now, okay, let's fast forward a few years, and now here you are as the director and the founder of the San Francisco International Piano Festival, which is significant, and the president of the the Liszt chapter here in San Francisco. So, talk to us maybe a little bit about creating opportunities in the arts, about creating organizations, about sort of more entrepreneurial approaches, because clearly, from what I'm hearing, you never, started out to, well, I'm gonna found organizations when I get older, and I'm gonna like create my own companies and my arts organization. So tell us a little bit about like how that starts and how that process is like.
Sure. You're right. As a kid, I didn't know anything about that. And I thought that there was a kind of magic. There is a kind of magic that happens when you, as an audience member, witness a concert. There's a seamless quality. You know, you're so focused on the artist and the experience of connecting with them. You don't see the stagecraft or the production or the logistical elements that brought that audience together to hear the artist. You don't think about the piano being moved in. You don't think about the marketing of the concert or the ticket sales or all the different pieces that come together, running the house, the front of the house, the actual backstage, all those things. So I think I had enough experience as a performer being the beneficiary of those things. I mean, where I would just show up as the artist and play. And then I've also since then had the opportunity to kind of see the other side. And what you're saying about creating opportunity, I think is really important, because if you limit yourself to the things that fit the first description, where someone else does all of that for you, that can be wonderful. But there's a finite amount of those opportunities. And so I think, first of all, even if you are the artist and your role is to show up and play, you're changed, your attitude is changed by having some knowledge and experience with everything that goes into making that concert happen. You'll interact with presenters and audience and press and all kinds of different people differently when you have been able to, walk in their shoes at least a little bit. And then also, I think on a more philosophical level, it demystifies some of maybe the value judgments or the mystique of these different opportunities. So I had an interesting one-to-one comparison where I played in Weill Hall at Carnegie in a concert presented by the Naumburg Foundation, and then I self-presented a solo recital there a few years later. Well, it's the same hall, it's the same piano. And seeing everything that goes into it, on the one hand showing up and playing, and on the other hand I remember going to Kinko's and printing off my own poster and delivering it to 57th Street entrance at Carnegie, and managing the ticket sales and all those different things. I was no different. I'm the same person. I didn't play better on one night because someone else did those things, or worse because I did those things. So I think once you kind of get over that idea that there's that expectation or that value judgment about the logistics of your concert performance, it just opens up more possibilities. And I think it also helps you get really clear about, what am I bringing to this? What's important to me? And kind of owning your own philosophy or your own sense of value around music.
Yeah, those are all just really, really excellent points. I mean, we are, you could argue, diminishing opportunities. And so being proactive about your career and using your creativity towards creating opportunities as much as you would towards your artistic growth. I mean, these are kind of essential components. Like you said, you didn't play any better or any worse, whether it's someone else who's inviting you or you're creating the opportunity for yourself certainly is easier and can be less to think about if other people are doing it. However, if you have an opportunity and it requires a little extra work, that can be very advantageous.
That's right. We're also in great company too, because so many of the great composers and performers that we admire hired their own halls and orchestras, and were passing out parts and setting up chairs and things like that before their concerts. So we're in good company.
Yes, we are. So let's hear you. Let's hear some of your playing, and I believe this is taken from the most recent San Francisco International Piano Festival concert. Do you want to introduce the work for us?
Sure, yeah. So we decided to share a piece by Claude Debussy called D'un cahier d'esquisse. It just translates to from a sketchbook. And it's a little bit of a hidden gem, a homeless hidden gem. It was originally conceived of as part of a triptych, and the three pieces were separated and published, I think even by different publishers at different times. So this piece isn't so well known, but it might be interesting for listeners to know that Debussy chose to record it on a piano roll almost 10 years after he wrote it. So you can actually listen to him play this piece and hear his timings and pedaling and style. And I think that if he chose to record it, it must have meant quite a bit to him.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be searching this out after the show for sure. Great. All right. Well, Gabriel, let's go ahead and cue that up then. Love to hear this. Wow, that was just beautiful. How did I not know that work?
I know. It's a hidden gem. No one knows it.
Wow, wow. What's the what's the quality of the recording of Debussy playing it himself like?
Well, I think it depends on the version that you hear. Um, sometimes it depends a lot on the piano that's reproducing that role. So I've heard different versions of it, some that are older and kind of scratchy, but it's not an acoustic recording, so it's not like the raw sound comes from 1913 in that sense. But then there's other more modern reproductions, you know, where the role is played on a more modern instrument. So it's probably every piano that you reproduce that role on will be a little different, but then you can get some sense of the timing, the freedom, the pedaling. I think he creates a timeless quality in his playing that you know you sense in the piece. There's a kind of time stops. Uh, there's a circular kind of nature of things where you can't tell. I can't tell when I'm playing it. How long has it been? Has it been a minute? Has it been 5 minutes? Has it been 10 minutes? And you don't care. You know, that's one of the most magical qualities of his music.
Yeah, it's a real luxury. All right, Kendra. Kendra, welcome. Let's talk a little bit about your background and get to know you a little bit. Jeff started off by telling us a little bit about how he got started in music, and maybe you could share with us a little the same. Tell us about yourself and your journeys in music.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Um, I would be happy to do that. I grew up in Michigan, a small town in Michigan, and my parents were always very conscientious about getting us, music lessons and things. And so I had piano lessons as a kid, but it was really when I was around 10 years old that my parents sought out a new teacher for me. And it just so happened that there was this really wonderful husband and wife team that had been in my town several years. They both had been university teachers and had left university teaching in order to open up their own studio. They never had any children of their own. They were just 1,000% about teaching privately full time. And I had the very great luck of, very great fortune of um, studying with them from the age of 10. And that was really uh, a very critical moment in my musical development because it kind of opened up this whole world of possibilities. And so I studied piano and theory with them. And then when I was, I would say, early teens, I expressed this interest in possibly singing. And they were instrumental also in finding my first voice teacher, this 85-year-old lady in Midland named Gwendolyn Pike, who was about this tall and really a character. She had been, Cheryl Studer's teacher and had quite a few notable students. And so I started studying voice with her. And then when it came time to go to music school, I was kind of torn and I didn't know if I wanted to, audition on piano or voice. So I auditioned everywhere on both. And I had a really funny mixed result. Eastman accepted me in voice performance, but not piano performance. Oberlin accepted me in piano performance, but not vocal performance. And University of Michigan accepted me in both. So it was split right down the middle. And that was actually a great result because I ended up going to Eastman and studying voice. And then I transferred to Michigan after that. And decided that I really wasn't a pianist. I was much more a singer. And so I ended up, doing the voice major and stayed there for my master's before I moved to California.
Yeah, well, let me just say that's quite impressive, and that's no small thing. What to get? I mean, those are all fantastic colleges with fantastic programs, and so to get accepted at that level in voice and piano, wow.
It was it was great, and I feel so grateful for the foundation that I was given as a young person. I mean, to have the opportunity to study with those teachers, they were so inspirational, and it just music opened up a whole world of possibilities for my entire life. Not only in music making, but spiritually and culturally and socially, all of these things. So I feel like I'm sure so many of us on this call feel just very grateful for that particular opportunity.
Yeah, it's a common theme in these discussions. The importance of really great teachers during our formative years who can really not just only provide the content, but really serve in sort of like a mentoring
Yeah,
kind of fashion. Um, you know, I
that's
think
right.
that's really wonderful.
It really was, and something, in the case of, their names are George and Susan Fee, and in the case of my time with them, I mean, it was really a lot of hand holding. I mean, they supported me almost, like musical parents. uh their door was always open. They never looked at the clock when you had a lesson. It was sort of really old school in that way. And their house was just full from floor to ceiling of books and records and art, all kinds of things. So for a girl at in a small town in the Midwest, it was like, what is this magical place I've just stepped into? So it made quite an impression. Yeah.
I think that resonates with a lot of us. It really does. Well, this is a really good segue because I think we're going to play a performance of you and George, or George accompanying you, in a Liszt song. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. This Liszt song is Glocken von Marling. It's about a bell in Marling, it's a small town, and it's not a very well known. Um, it's not a very well known song by Liszt, actually. George is a great Liszt fan, and so it was actually his idea to learn it. But it's all about this kind of um, finding comfort in these tones from the bells of Marling.
Wow, sounds wonderful. I'm a Liszt fan myself. So let's go ahead and cue this up now. Wow, that's beautiful. Oh my goodness. Wow. Kindra, you sound lovely.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. I was I was going to say it's such a special song, and people so often think of Liszt in this very kind of showy way. I think that's of course kind of this stereotype that everyone has, but uh, his really so many of his later things and uh, so much of who he was this, what you see, I think in Glocken Von Marling, very sort of deeply spiritual and reflective um, composer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just kept, I mean, beautiful performance. And I'm also just thinking, why isn't this piece more well known? Why wouldn't you want to program this? I mean,
Exactly. I know, but there's so much of that. I had the same question. But I don't unfortunately have an answer for it. But it's just a special jewel of a piece, I think. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Wonderful. Yeah. I would love to hear you sing that live. And I hope that that's something that we get to hear soon, because that would be really incredible.
It's probably time to program it again. I should say that was from a concert from a few years ago. George and I were actually that was a special period of my life because I had never worked with George as a in a collaboration, and it's something that he rarely did over the course of his career. I mean, almost never. But he lived in San Diego at the time, and I sort of brought it up one day as an idea, and he said, "Oh no, well, we couldn't do that, you know." And then I think he had a chance to sleep on it for a few days, and then wrote back and said, "Well, maybe, why not?" And so we did a series of the whole history of the lead at the Athenaeum down in La Jolla, and it was from Mozart to Mahler, actually. And it was a very special period of growth for me, and I think maybe for him too, because we worked on a huge amount of repertoire, and it was very concentrated over these 3 recitals in 5 days or something, and it's something I have wanted to do again. It was very useful to sort of say, let's learn these 100 liter, whatever it was, and then perform them, you know. So it's a great thing to kind of immerse yourself if you have that chance, the time in modern life. It was.
Yeah, well, I mean, full disclosure, before this went live, Jeff and I were talking about this, and I pointed out, I remember being in the concert that was a version of that you gave in San Francisco, and I remember hearing, what was it, 5 or 6, 7 different like Earl King versions. That was fascinating because we tend to know these one-offs, or like, oh, here's the iconic work for the setting, and here's the other, and then to hear, oh, wait, actually, here's 3 of these, and here's 7 of these, and oh, by the way, there's like 158 of these, or whatever, like this huge number is, and you
Yes.
can really sort of like compare and say, oh, okay, well, they were thinking along the same lines, or this person really took a left turn, and it gives you just a much more insightful view of the record.
Yes. Yeah, the great, poetry, there are usually multiple settings of each one of those poems, even if we sort of have this idea of what the definitive setting is. You're absolutely right. I think that composers are, and you know better than anyone, inspired by great words. And so it makes sense that those words would speak to many different composers.
Yeah, inspired, also intimidated, but that's part of the equation too. One last thing that struck me about this too is that as you were talking about what an incredible influence George was on you as sort of as you were a younger student, what a great opportunity then years later to perform as equals too. I mean, that must have been wow. That must have been really something.
It was very strange. Talk about intimidating, because I think when you are brought to music by a certain figure, or in this case, it was really the couple, the two of George and Susan, and they, I mean, and you look up to them your whole life, and you have some kind of idolatry that happens, I think, at a young age, but that's kind of natural with our teachers. It's a completely different dynamic. Of course, our relationships with our teachers change as we get older and as we become adults. And so some of that gets a little bit ironed out. But to make music together as true partners, to find words to ask for what you need in that balance, and going both ways, it's just a very different dynamic than I was going to say parent-child, but then teacher-student, So it was very special, and a very different dynamic than we had ever had before, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Gabriel, if you could maybe put the title of that particular song in the chat. I know some people are kind of interested in the translations, and of course it's a little bit more difficult to follow a song sometimes if it's in another language and you don't have a translation next to you. But I mean, nevertheless, the power of that performance in that piece really comes across. So wow, well, really wonderful. So now, okay, so we've kind of gone from both of we've heard the backstories, Jeff and Kindra. So now, as working artists, as you both are, with renown and all sorts of different activities, maybe you could talk to some of our students and sort of tell us a little bit of what life is like as a working artist. What does that thriving career look like for you? Everything from Jeff with the festival and teaching responsibilities and long-term performance relationships and short-term gigs that just sort of pop up. Maybe Jeff first. What's that like for you, Jeff?
I think you characterize it very well. All those things happen and they don't necessarily categorize themselves. They overlap. They can happen at the same time. Sometimes you go through a period where you're very focused on one thing. They're all different pieces of your relationship to music, and sometimes they're surprising. You may be particularly looking forward to one thing, and then something else comes along that surprises you in how fulfilling it was. Sometimes I find myself teaching what I need to hear or what I'm working on in my practice. And so I hear or see that in my students. And I hope I'm not wrong about it with my students, but I recognize that there's a kind of reflection there of, something that I'm really paying attention to. I think for me as a pianist, I had a certain idea growing up that pianists were solitary solo creatures, and I didn't have a lot of experience with the different kinds of collaboration that are very much a part of my life now, and that, by the way, feed my solo playing. So I would say, all the things that you mentioned form both let's say a logistical career picture and also a more holistic musical picture. So that if I have a day where I might practice for a couple hours for a recital program, coach a violinist, and then do some writing program notes or edits on a recording, and then work on scheduling something for the piano festival. All those things might happen in one day, and they're all music, and they're all kind of different parts of my relationship to music. So, yeah.
Finding that balance, right, between all those things. That's a tricky issue. Kindra, what do you does that resonate with you too?
Yeah, definitely. I remember I was on some a panel at some point with a bunch of singers, and they said, if you don't like homework, don't become a singer. And I think about that every time that I'm doing texts and translations that take just as long as it takes to learn the music and memorize it. Things that you don't really think about, that that are sort of always on your list. There's an endless or seemingly endless to-do list when you're developing a concert or a series of concerts for a particular season. And all those things that Jeff just mentioned, it's I think, like so many things, people's perception of what you do and what you actually do can be quite different. So there's a lot of correspondence, a lot of following up, checking on details for concerts. You know, like I said, the texts, translations, and just even planning a recital, for example, is a huge amount of thought goes into it. I think that for the program that Jeff and I will be doing quite a few times this fall and through the winter, you know, we probably read through 4 times the amount of music than we could ultimately have before we were able to really choose what seemed to fit appropriately with what. And we started out with one theme in mind and then threw that in the garbage. And so all of the process of that takes you to the point where you can actually go out on the stage and have something to say.
Yes, yes. I was thinking about that in particular just a few weeks ago when the piano festival was going on, and I was looking through and seeing all these incredible, oh, I want to see this and this, and I was putting these in my calendar, and then like it was really soon afterwards I realized the planner side of my artistic personality thought, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work because all of these little, like, not so little, but all these single events have like an exponential amount of work behind them that no one sees, and those aren't the things you take classes in at your conservatory or in your music program. So you kind of have to figure them out, or kind of do your own education, whether it's homework or like enrichment. And fortunately, there's lots of videos and classes, and these are skill sets that can be learned, but they do take time, don't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that you can get that. That's harkening back a little bit to what we were saying earlier, that you can refine your skill set from both sides. You can draw on your experience as a performer, things that you liked and didn't like about certain performances. Let's say when you're doing more the logistical or presenting side of things, and say, I know how I feel as an artist when this happens. So let me see if I can do it in such a way that, my colleagues will feel good. Whether it's rehearsal time, scheduling enough rehearsal time, tuning instruments, that's probably my text and translation equivalent. Um, we had a closing concert, where we had 2 grand pianos and a harpsichord on stage that all had to be tuned, to match each other. I'll probably never do that again, but we did it. And you're right, Kurt, that those are things, there's no class for that. And in fact, the professionals that have spent their life in their industry that you work with in those situations would tell you the same thing for as long as they've been doing it. There's no recipe. There's hopefully respect and thoughtfulness and professionalism, and then it's just a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the hard work on the rehearsal side before we play a clip from the two of you together. As you both were mentioning, we have all sorts of different gigs that come up, and sometimes it's just, oh, I'm playing with this person for the first time, or maybe we could just get a couple rehearsals and then it's off to something else. But if we're lucky, we have opportunities to work with an artist or groups of artists for extended period of times, and we get to work and sort of develop that sort of musical relationship and to see the kind of growth. together, and that's certainly something that the two of you have been able to do. So can you maybe talk a little bit about your working relationship, the concerts that you've given, and certainly your latest new recording as well? That would be wonderful to hear, because I think sometimes our students, we kind of forget that, you know, it is can be really beneficial to continue to grow and work with, you know, a small group of individuals.
I can speak on that just for a moment. I don't know if most of the students who are attending today are singers or pianists or a combination of all kinds of things, but I would say that when I was coming up in, you know, conservatory and music school, the arrangement was sort of that you had these collaborative piano majors, and I was just reading your message, Kurt. Yes, students, tell us what you play.
Come on,
tell us what you're up to.
give it to us.
And they would be assigned to our voice studios, and they would come and play with us, and they'd sort of be assigned to us for our recitals and things. But I think after you leave conservatory, it can be strange to figure out how to develop a relationship with a pianist. It seems like as a singer, you always have to hire the pianist. Certainly pianists should be paid. So it's not like, but it's not like you're partners in venturing into something together. And for me, that changed quite much when I became associated with Ledour Alive. We know the founder of Ledour Alive, Maxine Bernstein, was very devoted to this idea that we're absolute partners and that we form a musical partnership to create music together over a long period of time, if possible, you know, not just let's get together for this one concert, you know. And that really appealed to me. And I can say that, you know, working with Jeff, and I know that you have your partnership with Heidi and are able to create music, you know, over a period of time. It's such a magical thing and such a deep thing. There's really nothing like it to have someone that you can have an exchange of ideas with, who's just as excited about the repertoire as you are. So it's not like you're, you know, bothering a pianist to play with you, but who actually is enthusiastic about playing this rep. It's a very life-changing thing. So you singers out there and you pianists out there, if you can, or singers, if you find a pianist who really loves the song literature and the song repertoire, and likewise pianists, if you're playing Schumann, Schubert, Brahms, all of these composers, and you're not singing their song rep, you're actually not playing the majority of their output. so that's, I think, an essential piece of their repertoire as well, the vocal repertoire.
Yeah, very, very well put. And I would even add to that from a composition standpoint as well, the relationships we formed. I mean, you both have performed my music before. So each time, if there's something new, there's already a relationship there. I already know, oh, yeah, I'm familiar with working with Kindra. I'm familiar with working with Jeff. And it just makes it that much easier. And I think that's something that maybe doesn't get talked about as much as it should, or perhaps stressed. Jeff, what do you think about this?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think from the instrumentalist side, I mean, we're so lucky to have access to great singing in our you know, in my case with Kindra, and also then a deep relationship to text because that's something that we don't have as instrumentalists. And it seems like a lost opportunity if we have, let's say, kind of equivalent passage in Schubert that is a setting of poetry. We don't have to imagine or pull out of thin air what he might have been thinking about in a purely instrumental composition. We can look back to the song and say, well, he used exactly that kind of music to set this text. So when I'm playing my Schubert sonata, I have a point of reference there. And in addition to that, I mean, the highest aim, I think, of all of us as instrumentalists is to transmute or embody the human voice. So it seems also kind of crazy to just keep bashing away at our instruments without really embracing that, integrating as much of the human voice as possible.
Yeah, that's excellent points. We're going to hear a performance that the two of you are giving. Do you want to introduce that a little bit? Tell us about it.
Sure. This was from a special concert that was really still in the kind of shelter-in-place period in COVID. So this was August of 2020. We did an all Schubert concert. That was part of that season of the San Francisco International Piano Festival. And so it was an empty hall, and we actually, very much on the subject of this conversation, we interwove Schubert Piano Sonata with some of his Ledour. And so this is Der Lindenbaum from Winterreise. And yeah, it was a very intimate, reflective, powerful kind of time. So that's why we chose this.
All right, lovely. Well, let's hear it. Gabriel, go ahead and cue that up for us.
So manches
Wow. Oh my God. That was just like sculpted just so perfectly. Wow. What a beautiful, beautiful performance. Bravo to both of you. It was
Thank
really,
you,
really
Kurt.
gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
What hall are you in? Where did you record that?
So that was recorded at St. Stephen's
Oh, Belvedere,
in
right?
Tiburon. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Belvedere, Tiburon. That's right.
Wow. Well, this is gorgeous. This has been a wonderful opportunity to get to know both of you and your music making a little bit better. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of like what's going on? We're sort of semi-emerging out of COVID, and what's going on with both of you? What do you have plans coming up in the next, say, few months or so?
Yeah. So as Kindra mentioned, we have a recital program that we'll be performing in a couple different places. The first one is coming up on the 10th for a chamber music series on the Oregon coast. So we've kind of brought together a lot of different pieces that we've learned over the last year and a half, really. Songs by Ravel, Brahms, um, Purcell, arranged by Britten, George Walker. I'm probably forgetting something, but a kind of eclectic program that was really the product of a lot of quiet, reflective, and exploratory rehearsal time.
Oh, wow. It sounds lovely. I asked Gabriel if maybe he could put your websites in the chat. Is that the best way to sort of
Sure.
get information?
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah. That would be great because we would certainly love to hear more. Any videos, recordings that come out, that would just be wonderful. Thank you both for coming today. This has just been a real treat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you. Thank you. It was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm sure that everyone got a lot out of it. I know. I did. I'm going to be listening to these recordings again very soon.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you again for sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
everyone.
Bye bye now. Thank
Okay.
you.